Hey, this is Darren from Property Prosperity. I thought today I'd have a bit of a chat about a situation with a client of mine that rang me up, was asking about they had their pool in their rental property, and again, probably this is something first starting point. Anything to do with a rental property and anything that's going to cause maintenance issues is probably not necessarily a good thing. So a swimming pool and a rental property is not a very good mix, I would suppose, because essentially with a rental property, if anything breaks or anything goes wrong, then you're obligated to fix it. So again, one extra thing that can go wrong is a problem for you, and so a swimming pool is definitely potential that something can go wrong with the swimming pool. Hey Isaac, thanks for joining. So they rang me up and they had this swimming pool. Hey Damien, and they weren't really sure. They had some problems with their swimming pool. They were planning on putting their property on the market and they were looking at selling it. And they asked me whether it's worth fixing their swimming pool or whether it's worth just getting it removed, essentially, or just covering it over, really. And so, the question then is, what value is the swimming pool going to add to the sale price of the property, was really his question. Because if he's going to spend some money to fix up the pool, you want to make sure he's going to get some sort of return on his money he's going to spend to invest in it. So, and the thing to understand about swimming pools, and the thing to understand about selling houses in general, really, someone's going to pay the value they see in the property. So if someone wants a swimming pool in their house, they're going to pay more money to have a swimming pool in their house. And so, but if someone doesn't want a swimming pool, then they either might not pay any money for it, or they might actually discount the value in the house because they look at it as a negative rather than a positive. So I know from my experience, when I grew up, I had a swimming pool as a kid, and I thought it was pretty cool when I was a kid. And once I become an adult, it's just a hassle if you don't use it very often, particularly if you don't have heating in a swimming pool. It's too cold, and then when it's crazy hot, you can't be bothered going outside because you've got air conditioning, and it just ends up a huge amount of maintenance. So if anyone's had a swimming pool before, they probably understand what the maintenance required when you have a swimming pool. And it just gets to a certain point where you just get sick of it, and you sometimes you just sort of say, that's it, man. If I ever buy a house again, I'm never buying a house with a swimming pool, because it's so much easier just to get in the car, go for a drive down to the local swimming pool, have a swim, and then just come back home. You don't have to worry about that maintenance. You've got a year of maintenance just to go for a swim a couple of times a year, so it's probably not worth it. So for me, I definitely wouldn't want a swimming pool. And if I saw a house that had a swimming pool in it, I definitely would discount the value that I'd pay from the house, because for me, it's a massive hassle. I end up just having to pay someone to maintain it because I couldn't be bothered doing it, just for the sake of those few times a year that would be convenient for me to go out the back and have a swim. So, whereas if you're in a situation where you've always wanted a swimming pool, or you've got young kids that are going to use it every single day, and especially over summer, then you're going to see the value in that. It's going to be so much better than having to drive down the beach or having to go to the local swimming pool. And so you might pay 20, 30, 40, even $50,000 more than it otherwise would be. So that's pretty much where it came down to with this particular client situation, was, what sort of value is it going to add to his house? And the other issue is what's going to cost to sort of get it up to standard. Sometimes swimming pools can actually add to the atmosphere of the house as well. If you look at those luxury houses and they have those lap pools and all these amazing swimming pools, it's not so much the swimming pool itself, it's also the how nice it looks, and actually becomes part of the scenery and part of the backyard landscape as well. Hey Daniel, thanks for joining. And so then it comes down to what value is it going to add visually to the house as well. So when we came and had a look at the swimming pool, it was actually in pretty average condition. It had a leak in the bottom of the pool. To try and fix it, it was fiberglass, it was in ground, it wasn't particularly nice around the outside of the pool. So really, to try and get it back to standard, it's going to have to fix the fiberglass crack, and then likewise he's also going to have to I don't know what they call surface around the outside of the pool, and there's a whole pile of work you'd have to do. So literally it would cost him thousands of dollars, and the question is, is someone going to pay more money for that house because of the swimming pool? Who knows? It really depends whether they want it or not. And it wasn't really worth the risk, I think, from my perspective and from his perspective, because you don't really know whether it's going to add a lot of value. So, it sort of comes down to a personal preference then. And whenever I look at a house and someone's looking at doing renovations and it's purely for a personal preference, I always question whether it's worth doing, because you don't really know. If you can see that everybody's going to think it's a good idea, then it's cool. But if it's you're not really sure whether it's going to add value or not, then probably 9 times out of 10 I'd suggest probably not do the renovation or not do that particular thing you're looking at doing. So The key is too, if you're going to remove a pool, you're going to do it in the right way. Initially, he was going to look at just filling it full of dirt and then covering it over and then just leaving it like that. The danger of that, it would have looked terrible, to be honest. You would have seen the outline of the pool around the concrete outline around the pool. Anyone that walked into having the house and seeing it on the market would know there used to be a pool there, and it would just straight away, it would just create concerns and people's worries about the hassle they'd have to try and remove this pool. And if you don't do it properly too, it can actually be dangerous too, because what happens if you don't actually crack the pool and pull it all apart, and just fill it full of dirt, then when it rains it feels full of water and turns into like quicksand, so it actually can be quite dangerous as well. So my advice, you either get rid of the pool totally or you fix the pool up. Again, fixing the pool up, I question whether it's actually worth it, depending on how old the pool is and stuff, because it's just going to create issues down the track. So my advice is probably, if you can, maybe just rip the pool out, weigh up the costs and to work out what it's actually going to cost you to do that. But the cool thing is with a clean slate, then with this particular example, what we did was we ripped the pool out, covered it full of dirt, put some lawn down. Then they had a nice big backyard. Most people were going to like a nice big backyard with lawned area. You're not going to be able to tell whether people necessarily want a pool or not. Hey John, thanks for joining. Thanks for the likes, I appreciate that. And the next thing you got to understand about pools too, this is particular to South Australia, but it's going to apply to a lot of other places around the state too. There's a lot of legislative requirements as far as safety around pools as well. If the pool was built prior to 1993, you don't necessarily have to comply to the safety codes as far as fencing and a whole pile of other safety requirements as far as pool fencing goes, while you're still living in the house. But if you go to sell the house, you are obligated to meet the required standards for pool fences and a whole pile of other requirements. So that means you're taking a lot of risk on yourself, I would suppose. And this is one of the other reasons why, if you're selling a house and you've got a pool, you really have to make sure it's been done correctly and it's going to cover everything. Because if something happens down the track, let's say you sell it to somebody down the track, they've got kids, they're playing around the pool, and suddenly the fence isn't up to standard that it should have been, and they can prove that it wasn't up to that standard when you sold the house, then you're liable. You're responsible for the inadequacies of the pool when you sold the property. And it's essentially, the contract can be null and void, and you can be liable for any dangers that were associated with the fact that you didn't bring the pool up to standard. And it's not even the people actually, when buying the house off of you, you can't say, oh cool, I'll give you a bit of a discount, or I'll knock some money off the price, or hey, you're happy to write it into the contract that I'm not going to meet the requirements. You're responsible regardless of whether that owner is willing to accept that responsibility or not, because you as the vendor, the seller, is responsible to make sure it meets all the safety requirements, regardless of whether the purchaser is aware of those safety requirements or not. So that's the huge amount of responsibility you're taking on. So if you are going to have a pool and you are going to sell it to somebody else, you really need to make sure it's up to whatever requirements has to be. My advice to you is probably get an independent person to come in and assess the pool and make sure it's covered all those requirements. I wouldn't just walk around and say, yep, that looks all pretty good to me, because the danger is if something goes wrong down the track, then you're going to be liable, and it's your word against theirs. So I think the benefit of having someone come out and do a proper audit, I suppose they'd call it, just to make sure it's up to requirements, and then get them to sign off on it, it's just going to be a lot of peace of mind, a lot of safety for you if something goes wrong down the track and they come back to you and make you liable, essentially. So the question then is, should we have a pool when we're selling a house? Again, I'm probably anti-pool because I had a pool growing up and I knew it was a hassle to deal with having to clean it all the time. So I'm probably not the best person to answer to what I'd probably say sway on the side of no. If you're going to looking at doing a renovation, you're weighing up whether I put a pool in before I sell it because I think it's going to add value, I'd probably still say no, because it's just more things that can go wrong and more potential that you might find someone that might not be interested in having a pool. So my advice to you is probably stay away from anything that is not clear that you're going to have a good return on your money. And it's not just a matter of, if you spend $50,000, you're going to get $50,000 back. If you spend 10 grand, you want to get $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 return back on your money. It's got to be clear that return is going to be clear compared to the amount of money you're spending. So, I think that's not really that clear as far as swimming pools go. And there's just so much more things to go wrong and liabilities and obligations associated with swimming pool as well. I just don't really think it's worth the hassle. So hopefully that's made sense. And if you've got a swimming pool, obviously you wouldn't necessarily rip it up if you've got a really nice swimming pool that's adding to the value of your house, and you can just see it's pretty obvious there how nice it is. But if you've got a swimming pool that looks a little bit dodgy and it looks a little bit dated, and you think it's not going to really appeal to that many people, then maybe I would probably look at the options as far as taking it out, and then you can landscape that backyard. Traditionally, a lot of backyards aren't really that big as well, and so by ripping out the pool, it's going to open up the size of the backyard, and it's going to give people so many more options as far as their landscaping goes. So hopefully that's made sense, everybody. If you've liked what I had to say, then click on the like button. If you haven't liked it, still click on the like button because I really appreciate it. And if you've had experience in the past with swimming pools, or you bought a house and it's had a swimming pool, if you've always wanted a swimming pool, then click on the comment button. I'd really be interested to find out what your thoughts are on buying a house with a swimming pool, whether you think there's any value in it. And if you've got something you'd like me to talk about in a future episode, feel free to click on the comment button, and I'm happy to chat about anything that you'd like me to chat about property related. And John, thanks for your feedback. Yes, it makes sense to me too, but that's why I said it. But I'm sure there's other people that don't necessarily agree with what I've had to say. But yeah, I'd be happy to hear from what you had to say. So thanks, guys. I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.